Hello. Today my guest is Jamie Monk. Jamie is a former professional runner, having posted times of 14 minutes for a 5K and running in the same group as Mo Farah. Jamie's insight on performance is fascinating, and if you're like me and thought that running is pretty much one foot in front of the other as fast as you can, you have a lot to learn. Following his career as a runner, Jamie worked for Vitality, where he had the privilege to interview British sporting heritage like Jonny Wilkinson, Root and Jessica Ennis. And some of their stories we'll hear a little bit about today as well. And since then, Jamie has become the managing director of a wellness company. Enjoy. Jamie Monk, thank you for going on Ross Examination.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I'm actually thinking about changing the name of Ross Examination, mainly because I said it to someone the other day and they said it sounded like I was about to give them a colonoscopy. So
I was warned about that.
Well, we'll
That's
see how it
for
goes.
after.
We'll see how it goes. Jamie, I think the first thing I should mention about you is when I first met you, we were chatting and I was talking about how I wanted to run a sub 20-minute 5K.
Yeah.
And I was talking to you through and I was saying, I'm a bit of a bigger guy, so it's all about, I've got to get through that first few K.
Yeah.
We had a nice chat. You were very nice to me. And then I went and spoke to someone else. And I said exactly the same thing as I do, just sort of spinning the same stories around. And this person said, you should speak to Jamie Monk. I was like, well, I've just spoken to Jamie Monk. And didn't say anything. He was like, why would I speak to him? He said, well, he runs a 5K in sub 14 minutes, a marathon in sub 220. He used to run with Mo Farah and was in the Olympic training squad. So that's you. And I'm there telling you how I'm trying to get my 20 minutes.
I was picking up loads of tips from you, to be fair.
Well, you're welcome. You can carry that forward. But that is genuinely very humble of you, but very impressive as well. So talk me through that. How close were you to the Olympics?
I feel like there's levels to it. And so in terms of like my running journey, I grew up in the middle of nowhere. So essentially there was no playing in the streets after school with friends or anything like that. We lived in a tiny village where we've only got a neighbour on one side, no street lights, nothing like that. And my mum was a teacher at my primary school. And we used to have this loop, which we called the 5 mile. It was 5 miles long.
Right, I guess.
And it makes a lot of sense. And all I would really be able to do for entertainment was this 5 miler. So I'd either run it, cycle it, or one year when I was about, I reckon 11, I got an electric scooter.
Oh,
Like a sit down.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. And so for a period of time I would use the electric scooter to do this loop, but it didn't quite make 5 miles, so I'd always have to walk the last half mile back. So I was always doing this 5 mile loop. And then over time, like, you don't actually think about it, but you're actually, I'm reasonably good at running. So then I went to uni and studied sports science at undergrad. And then I went on to study sport physiology for a master's. And in my undergrad, I was starting to like really see other people around. And where I was in Brighton, the EIS were there. And one of my lecturers, she went on to be, which is the English Institute of Sport. Yeah. She went on to be head of physiology at the English Institute of Sport. And in my first year, I remember there was always people doing their dissertations because it was a practical course, and environmental physiology was big in Brighton. So there would often be people asking for support in terms of having participants to their studies in heat and in altitude. And I was like, I've heard about those things. That's a bit of a cheat code. So I would just volunteer and be like, I'll do an 8-week trial in altitude. It saves me going to somewhere in Africa and like properly training. And through doing that, they were like, we need people that run certain times consistently so you can tell that the interventions you're doing are actually making the difference. And that's kind of like from there that they were like, this guy he'll do it, and you become that person. And then through that, I think like running is a very, very like team oriented sport in terms of you'll probably have one or two athletes that are at a different level. And they'll need different things that enable them to be as good as they can. So they'll have a style of running, or they'll have weaknesses or strengths that you want to improve for them. And so you set up a group of people around that person to help them do that. And so in terms of like saying those things, I think why I don't necessarily consider myself like that is because I was a good person to help other people. For me, I think that the difference in levels in sport, in running, is higher than any other sport.
Oh, really?
Well, I'll give you an example. So there's so many people running these days, which is amazing. And there's so many people that get really good quite quickly. but I think there's other things to that. But if you met someone who said, oh, so-and-so's done a sub 3 hour marathon, you'd be like, that is seriously good.
It's quick, yeah.
You've got to run like 4:17 per K, I think it is. So you're doing 21-minute 5Ks over and over and over again. But the best in the world will be an hour quicker than that.
Yeah, it's mental.
Yeah, and like they're averaging 20K an hour.
So how far off were you to those like top people? You were 2:23, was it?
So marathons never really I'd say 5K was like...
5K was your thing?
Yeah.
And what was your time?
Yeah. I dipped under 14:30 odd.
14:30?
Yeah. But like the Olympic champ, I think the Olympic world record is like 12:27, something like that.
My goodness.
So, but then like where I was quite good was that like I had a good long last kick.
Right. And how long is a last kick in a 5K?
So obviously the bell is where your 400 goes, but people have different tactics to different races. So for me...
The bell goes at 400?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the last lap. And then you usually see people kick off. But like if you give Mo Farah as an example, probably the best known, the best we've ever had at 5 and 10K, he generally would run a race relatively slowly, as in he liked a slower race. You'd always see him, if you watch London 2012, I was actually there in the crowd that 5K night.
So you trained with him as well?
Well, again, like you're part of groups, which helps him do his thing. And so he would have a slower race would be good for him because then he had a longer closing kick.
Right.
So at 600 he might go.
So he doesn't want people to go out the gates hard.
Exactly.
That ruins his race. Yeah,
if you look at when he ran in Rio, the other like the Ethiopians, the Kenyans, were working together to go out hard. Right. You saw it similarly in...
So do they do it a bit like sort of Tour de France, where you pick
Yeah.
That happens in running?
Yeah, for sure.
So you qualify for the Olympics knowing I'm not...
Oh, 100%.
I'm not going to be the one.
Yeah. So like...
I didn't know that.
Yeah, your job is to... Because there is only one, like... It's similar to cycling, I would say, that there's another example of it. Who was it recently? Jakob Ingebrigtsen and Josh Kerr.
Yeah.
They both tried to kill each other.
Yeah, I watched that. And then that
The American ran through and won it because he ran his own race.
So try and help me with this one. So are they... Because in cycling you have the wind resistance, or you get in the, what do you call it, slipstream?
Yeah.
Does that happen in running?
Yeah, for sure.
Right, so that does...
Drafting
okay.
And also like you can dictate the pace of the race. So if you get to the front and you sit and you slow it down, like the pacemakers play a massive role.
Yeah, so I always thought, okay, well, a runner in a 5K, because I can see in cycling at such long distances, that little margin from a slipstream makes a big difference. But in a 5K, where you're looking, was it 12 minutes these people are running in? Yeah,
I mean, I'm sure, I think it's 2021, 12:27.
Yeah.
Like, and that's what I mean, is it's so unimaginable.
Oh, it's...
Like, it honestly...
And what's the K pace for the 5K?
It'd be like 22K an hour.
What is that? So what is that,
Oh, well, I'm not going to get the stat right, but you know when...
That's right, we can fact check it later.
Yeah, wouldn't actually. You know when you tell a story and someone's like, oh, let me just Google that.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
No one did.
But Eliud Kipchoge, when he did his sub 2 hour marathon, he obviously, I think it's amazing that they had a team of pacemakers around him. And those pacemakers had to be like Olympic level or above, or like Olympic champions. Like that's how good they were. But he was running his 5K splits for 8.5 of them essentially in 42K at 14:40 per 5K.
Yeah.
There's been something like millions and millions of park run times in history. At that point, his average 5K split was in like the top 10 ever.
Yeah.
So like 8.5 times over. And the way that they make it look and the way that they glide.
Oh, it's meant.
It doesn't look fast, but then you see like a photographer trying to run alongside them and pull over. Yeah. They're like overtaking cyclists and stuff. So the strength of them to maintain that pace, I think, is where you actually see how good these people are, is that they're so comfortable running at what is a sprint pace for most people. Most people can't even run that speed. No,
it's mental. You and I actually did a training session the other day.
Yeah.
And I think we were doing 250 meters, taking it in turns. Yeah. And I went out the gates hard. Was probably going faster the first couple, and then much slower by the last two. And you were pretty much the same speed the entire time.
But I think that's a good example of it, of what we've been just talking about there, is that if anything below 400 meters, you'll hammer me. I can just maintain a high pace consistently for a while. So like when you're looking at the science of running or just endurance sport in general, like my lactate threshold would be quite, so my ability to deal with high amounts of fatigue for a longer period is okay. Whereas, like as a sprinter, people are like, how fast can you sprint? Not very fast.
Yeah.
Like you'll be okay.
You're still pretty quick though.
Yeah,
you bounce well.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's like a dialed up version of my running technique. So it's like if I want to run quicker, it will just see me like accentuate my movements, but it's still like a long distance runner looks, not like a sprinter looks.
Well, it's interesting because it's one of the few sports. So as you mentioned, running has become quite the zeitgeist lately. It's very popular. A lot of the people that are popular and influencers online aren't necessarily experts.
Yeah.
So it's this interesting area where you've got people following these people that aren't actually experts. There's still nothing wrong with that, by the way. But if you were to try and help someone run a 5K faster, and you actually did it with me.
Yeah.
You actually paced me for my sub 20.
Sub 20?
1958.
Yeah. There was nothing to play with.
There was nothing left in the tank there. How would you approach that with someone? If they want to improve their 5K time, what would you tell them to do?
I think there's so much support out there in terms of structuring a training program, periodizing, what sort of sessions to do. You do need to do a tempo run each week, an interval, a long run, a recovery, whatever that. There's like a standard formula for that. And there's actually loads of really good like apps and training programs now which automate those things. But one thing that so I'd say two main things for me. One is that when you start doing 5Ks, you will make big PBs really quickly, probably for quite a long time, purely on pacing and understanding.
How long's a long time?
Well, until you start to be able to run it every single time within a few seconds.
Right, okay.
You know, so like what was the time that you did before we did our one?
So we did 2, didn't we? We did 1 and I think I did it in 2047.
Cool.
And the second one was 1958.
So 49 seconds we got between 2 runs.
Yeah, which
is not fitness. You may have done some things in between and you may have had a better day. But like I could run 10 and be within 3 seconds.
Right.
And know that I've got nothing left to give. So in terms of pacing as well, it's like understanding what the right pacing looks like for you, like whether you want to do a negative split, where you want it, so that means the second half quicker than the first, or whether you want to actually like get progressively quicker or go out hard and hold on. But the main thing that I would say is like, it's mentally brutal. Like you've got to be on the edge the whole time. And when you think, I can't do this, you've got to keep going.
Yeah.
So until you start failing at it, I would say that you've probably got quite a bit more room to fulfill there. And then the other part, which I think is way bigger, is strength and technique with running. So like, it's amazing to see so many people run. And I'm going to sound like such a snob here, but you don't see many people run and think you look amazing.
Really?
Or you look fluid or you look strong. You often think that doesn't look very fun, or your body is quite out of alignment and you're at risk of injury. And like you see people when they're sort of getting ready to run, they'll stretch and stuff, but it sounds so nerdy and you probably would be looked at a certain way, but I'm like, where's the A-skips, guys? Like, where are we doing the hip openers?
Where's the dynamic stretches?
Yeah.
You're about to do something dynamic.
Like, where's the hurdles? How is this going to work? And I think actually, like when you get good rhythm, so I always run with a chain, and like the rhythm, some people these days as well, like they're way harder than me, but they'll run with a metronome. I mean, I'm mental enough as it is to do that would not be helpful.
But what's a chain? As in like just a neck?
As in like yeah. So you can feel the swing of it.
Oh, and that helps.
I get into a rhythm, and that's what
okay.
And then I know that at 3K, for example, when I'm getting tired, I've got to keep that rhythm going, and that comes down to strength. So yeah, I would say, of course, you can do the training programs and things like that. That's a given. But then outside of it, it's like understanding how you race or run it well, and then how you deal with your fatigue and your efficiency. And that's a massive part in how good your overall performance would be.
Yeah, the thing about technique is quite interesting, because didn't you say technique also isn't necessarily about training technique? It's about having the strength to maintain technique.
I think people underestimate how much of a strength sport running is. Like when you get tired, the first thing you want to do is hunch over, and then you want to probably start being a bit more flat-footed, and then your arms probably go a bit left and right, and then you're done at that point. Like your ability to maintain your form is what will carry you through. And so, but to do that, like you need a really strong core, for example. Like the first thing that people will often do when they run is that you want to be angling forward from your ankles, not from your hips. So you don't want to tilt your upper body forward. You want to lean forward from your ankle. But as soon as you get tired, you start to double over. Then your lung capacity reduces, and then you're done. Like you're never getting that back. So it's about when you're getting into that fatigue state, how can you help your body as much as possible? And staying in the same position is down to form. And also, like, it is repetition of doing it. Like, when you talk about like the amount of people running these days, I think it's amazing. It really makes me sort of question myself when you see some of the times they're posting, because they're like seriously good. But I think often it is followed by injury. And then because actually you can get to that point quite quickly. But then, you know, I run every day pretty much. I obviously like structure it so I don't go hard every day. But I don't feel like I'm at risk of those injuries because I'm doing it right and moving my body in the right way. So you can go really hard and get a good time. But then what's the longevity of that, and how long are you actually going to be able to sustain it before? And ultimately, like, that's the thing that will make the biggest difference in the long run.
Well, and that's an interesting point, because no one ever, well, I don't think, unless you've become some kind of professional athlete or a decent level of athlete, no one teaches you how to run.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I think, you know, most people who are able physically just can run, but it's such a different experience when you're feeling good and like you're just like the contact time on the floor, you're just bouncing along. Like, it feels amazing. And it's not, I always try and make sure that my gauge for if I know I'm running well is if my lungs are my limiting factor, not my body.
Right.
So if my body is, then that annoys me.
Because do you perceive that as uncontrollable?
Yeah. Yeah. Or the reason why, like, I don't feel like I could compete that long and that well is because my body was just like not able to deal with it. So like my Achilles tendon was always an issue.
Really?
And it would be so, I mean, you must have had this in rugby. It's so frustrating when you want to go out, you're ready, you've got all the motivation in the world, but your body just doesn't allow it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing now, is like, I want the limiting factor to be the right thing, which for me is just my fitness, which is ultimately your lung.
Yeah, or like mentality or something. Can you, as long as you know you can go deeper in the well, whereas if you've got patellar tendonitis or something that is like, I genuinely can't run anymore.
Yeah.
That's
just
frustrating.
Pure frustration. And there's nothing that you can, there's no way of training out of that.
Yeah. And to touch on that again, so I always thought when I'm running, if I let my form go, I can keep on going. But you're saying there's more energy leakage from losing your form than holding it.
Yeah. But at the same time, if you're fighting to hold your form, then you're going to become tense, and that will use up a lot of energy as well. So it's about being able to remain relaxed whilst holding your form, whilst fatigued. And that's where probably like reps over time, your like movement patterns, things becoming kind of just, again, it's like any skill, right? Like if you take a golf swing or a cricket shot, it's about the sequence of things happening in the right order. And if you can get that right and just make it innate and make it something you don't think about, then actually relaxing into it just allows you to keep going. I always think of it as like cycling in midair, just like keep that rhythm going.
Yeah.
But saying that, like, I ran pretty hard yesterday and I was on a treadmill clinging on for dear life, and it was horrible. It looked awful. Like, I have a tight hip, like my left hip has been a problem for about a year. And as soon as I'm getting to that last like kick with 300 meters to go where it is just flat out, it looks horrific. So I'm not saying, you basically want to prolong the time it takes to get to that point. Yeah. It will come.
We spoke about this, but running is interesting, especially when you get over a certain distance, because it's, as long as you can take another step, you can keep going, as long as it's not so excruciating that you have to stop. And to be fair, it does sometimes feel like that.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting sport in that way, because you can always take one more step. So in theory, you can finish the race.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's why I have always quite enjoyed it, because you know, when you train regularly, it's essentially how hard have I got every single day and how much can I push? And every time you finish a session, it's a massive achievement. And when you don't finish it, I mean, everyone's done that thing where you've been running hard and you think, I could have given a bit more. And you've got to get to that point where you're like, well, you know, when we used to train and do things like VO2 max tests, so like a maximal test on a treadmill, and it's a bit more scientific. So you're being tested for various things. Again, this was where I was cheat coding through people's studies and stuff. You'd wear a harness on the treadmill, so you'd stop when you fall. And that's how you know you're at true exhaustion. And I mean, that's extreme, and you're not going to do that.
Really?
Yeah, you just go to it goes a bit dark, and you're like, wow.
Do you slightly black out a bit?
You just, cognitive function, I think, really. One thing that we used to do quite a lot, and I still do it now, is like sums in your head. Well, I mean, you'd always try and calculate like pacing and distances. So if you're shooting for a time, so say you wanted to do an 18-minute 5K next, you've got to be doing 16-ish K an hour. That'd be right, 3:45.
So you're working that out as you run.
Yeah, so you're constantly like trying to think, because if you miss it by a few seconds, that's annoying. and you probably can gain those. But again, like when you start to get really tired, obviously the blood distribution goes elsewhere and your brain just struggles to give you the most simple sums.
Yeah, that is an interesting thing in the way you train that. So we had this in rugby as well, by the way. So some clubs would do training where you get on the line, you have to run to the 22 and back 3 times really fast, or you do a Bronco test. Now, those things are quite, you can be quite mindless with it. Whereas in the game, you can't be mindless a lot of the time. You have to be making decisions and identifying things, and that has to be on point. So the better training was when you're doing conditioning games, and you have to still be making decisions. And the better thing, the interesting thing comes around talking back to referees. You know, in rugby, people tend not to. So it's very easy to not talk back to the referee when you've got energy. But when you're tired and the referee makes a bad call, you want to scream.
Yeah. So
we had some coaches do a really interesting thing where toward the end of the session, they start making deliberately bad calls and see if you say anything. Now, if you say anything, you get pinged. But we also had where they'd straight up screw you over.
Right.
We had this test where you go 22 and back 3 times.
Yeah.
And it's a sprint, and you'd keep doing them. And they said, if anyone doesn't hit the line, we do it again.
Right.
And so everyone looks around and go, right, no one missed the line. Everyone get at least a foot over the line.
Right.
And the S&C coach would wait, and then you get toward the end and he'd pick someone randomly who did hit the line and go, oh, right, Ross didn't hit the line. And then, of course, I go, I did hit the line.
And that's exactly
And then they go, oh, complaining, 2 more reps. And you're like, So it's trying to train it. And then you see it in the game. Very few people talk back to ref. You see it every now and then when they're under serious pressure, but you're trying to train to not kick back and not complain.
Yeah. Well, did you ever have that thing where you'd be in a super high pressure situation and then a really random thought would come in your head and you're like, get out of me. I could be, even like this morning, I'm thinking about this or something, and then I'll think about whether I should have chicken or salmon for dinner. You know,
in a high pressure
in the moment, and you're like, oh, that's awful. Like,
I should be focused, sort of thing.
Well, so in the role that I currently am, Louise's founder, her husband is Joss Butler, England cricketer, and he said to me before, he's been out in the middle thinking like, what did I do the binzer? Oh, it's like a World Cup semi-final or something. And like having those things,
intrusive thoughts, but they're not
triggers. It panics
negative
because you're like, that's awful. I should be, but actually, maybe it's not. I don't know. But it's an interesting one because you can't control it at all. Almost the more you try and focus, it's like I'm going to get into flow state here, and I'll think about that. How do you can't just make it happen, but you can train the right way so that when you do the thing, it just becomes not necessarily natural, but it becomes like just, I'm such a process-driven person. Like logic and process is the only thing that I can ever rely on, because all I've ever thought on a start line of any event or any race is I'll know before that whether I'm in the right place or not.
Oh, really?
And then I'll leave it at that, Yeah, you
think the majority is done beforehand, then once you're out there?
I have to think like that. Otherwise, I'd be stressed and nervous.
You are a big preparer, though, aren't you? You take care of, if I may say so, you're quite humble, you don't talk about this, but you don't drink much coffee, you don't drink much alcohol, you've been very disciplined, you eat really well. You are big on the preparation side.
It's the only way that I know to allow for success to happen, I think, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know whether things will be successful or not, or whatever that measure is. So I just try and limit the things that will be detrimental to that happening, essentially.
Because I know some rugby players would be the same, and then there are some rugby players that rock up on a Saturday and just play, and they smash everyone else out of the park with no preparation, hungover. Does running have an equivalent? Are there anyone who is there a bad boy of running?
There needs to be more, because that would be cool.
Or is it too structured where there's less?
Like, it's a physical, like the skill is less, but I would say for some people that works better. And also, I don't have the talent. I'm not going to be that harsh on myself, but like I am, but the physiology essentially. So I have like quite long legs and a short upper body, which does help me. But if you look at like an East African runner, they'll have huge Achilles tendons and really high calves, and they're literally, grown up in altitude and stuff like that. So they're physiologically just on a different level. So I think for me, I had to try and to this day with everything, like with work and business, like I feel like I don't know what I'm doing hugely. So I'll try and limit the negative things that I can control. Like,
so increase certainty as much as you can around the things that you can.
Yeah. And then I can rest on that, if you like.
Well, can I ask you then, in your running career, to what percentage of your potential do you think you achieved?
That's a good question, and one that I think of more now. So I don't think I fail enough. And I don't think one of my sort of things this year is to, like, I'm really fortunate that I've done something for a long time. I will give you an answer, I think, in a minute.
Yes, sorry. Just looking for a number here.
Editor on this, yeah. 70%. No, I think that I am fortunate to be physically able, and I want to figure out to what extent that is. So with short, sharp, intense running, I think pretty close to, I don't think there was much more that I could give there. And I think, and I'm not, you're kind to call me humble, but I'm not being humble here by saying that that's way off where the best in the world are, like so far off. So it's about being realistic there. But since that, I've done a couple of things which have like, I thought, I'll see how that goes and see if I can push. And I did 7 marathons in 7 days a couple of years ago, thinking, that will take me to that point. And it was tough, but it was fine.
What time was you running them in?
2:20. No, we could any time, to be honest.
Really?
Between 4 and it was part of a bigger thing. So it wasn't just about like me running those on my own. It was other people joining and stuff like that. So they slowed me down. No,
but that's interesting as well, because you have said that you, since kind of stopping, you've actually somewhat avoided competing the same way. So you'll always, if you do run a marathon, you run it with someone to pace them, or you ran my 5K with me, which was a challenge. I'm imagining a lumbering fool behind
me.
But you got me there.
Yeah.
Why do you think you don't want to?
Yeah, that's something that I feel like I'm not sure about, and whether it's a good or a bad thing. So I've done the London Marathon I'm so lucky, done it like the last 5-10 years, I don't know, like a long time. And every single one for that period, I've run with someone else to pace them through it. I do get a huge amount of enjoyment from that. And like, I love being able to help them through my experience. And like, I almost find it a challenge. I'm like, I'm going to get every ounce of you. And I feel like the last 2 years, we have achieved that hugely. And I do love that. Like, and I take it to the nth degree, like, I'll shield them from wind. Lenny is one of my best friends.
You definitely shielded my left leg, I reckon.
Yeah. Didn't really have much of an impact on you. I had to get a sailor. But, I was really trying to get him through. But then when it comes to myself, I'm doing that also because I don't want to test myself in front of others. But then at the same time, I'll go out in the morning and I don't use Strava because I don't want people knowing. Well, I don't know if I don't want people knowing. I just like it to be my own thing. So last year, every year, my cousin and I share the same birthday, and we do a half marathon. It's like the London Olympic Park half marathon falls around that time. So we always do that. And every year I've run it with him. And this year, as in 2024, I was like, I fancy it this morning. I just felt good on the morning. It wasn't prepared necessarily for anything massive. And I was, I'm going to give it a go. And I ran hard and ran really well. And then I was like, I should do that more. Like, why am I not? But in terms of why I'm not, I think a part of it is like, you're not where you used to be. Other people are way better. And I do try and figure out like why I need to, like if I say I've got, but I think why I need to is because I can, and I enjoy that process. Is
it an element of, this is where I left it, this is how good I was when I left it, going back to it now, I don't want people to see me as this. Is there that, or is that completely off?
No, I think it's on. Like, it's also the thing that people know you for loads. So if there's other people that are doing it way better, then that's not really your thing anymore. Like, I'm sure, I don't know, your family always consider you the rugby player. And I have friends and people that, when I meet them, and this is really nice of them, they'll ask me how running's going. And I'm like, yeah, really good. I've got another job now though. And that's kind of where I'm transitioning out of that, but I'm still holding on to it because I do love it. And I do want to still push for it, but I also, don't have the time and the facilities to achieve those things either.
Yeah, I'd find the same if I was to go and play at a local rugby club.
Yeah,
I think it would be.
You'd have to dominate, right?
Yeah, and
you'd
also
have to be good.
You'd have to be really good, but also you're then playing on a rubbish pitch with 29 other players who are rubbish,
and then you want to look at them and be like, "Oh, you guys don't get it." Like, I am actually.
I would have done this.
Yeah.
I was in my prime. Ooh,
it's the same now. Like, I could go and do a park run. I'm like, well, I might not win. I can't have that. So
and does that genuinely put you off doing it? It's like,
yeah, but every now and again I'll pick one and I'll just like I've never done an official park run, but I went to Norfolk last year with my brother and our family, It wasn't just him. I don't know why I've singled him out. And we did a park run on Saturday morning, and I haven't registered for it. And I picked it. It was like the middle of nowhere in Norfolk, and I was like, "Oh, go for this one," because I thought like there's like normal people just out for a nice Saturday, and all of a sudden I'm like, I'm going to win this. And then I did. You know, you get to the end, and the lady's like, "Oh, you've got to come through and buzz your tag," and I was like, "I don't actually have one." And then, but like, no one cares. So why am I?
Sure, word didn't get around.
Well,
Jamie Monk's running today.
But if someone good was there, I would have bailed probably.
Really?
Probably.
Have you ever given up on a race?
Yeah. My first marathon.
Your first?
Yeah, because I think like in running, you kind of, I don't know as a rule, but generally, if you're not making it at one level, you just go up. Hence why I'm probably on like ultra marathons by now, because you go up distances. But the first one, I remember that I trained really well for a long time, and I wasn't doing it to any level, again, just for my own sake. And about 20 miles in, I had a sore calf and the time was going, and I walked for a minute or two. And at that point I was like, I can't get this back. And so I just walked off to the side, and because I was like, well, I can do this in a slower time, or I can just not do it. And I decided that at that point that there was no point doing it, but that was the worst thing that I could have done, because actually it was just massively letting yourself down by not finishing the job. And, you know, in some ways, like, you're proud of that because you went hard, and, you know, like, I'd rather do that than go steady and not get to where you want to be. But just why? Like, there was nothing on the line with it apart from myself. And then I just thought, well, it's gone now, and it's going to keep on going, so there's no point doing it. But it was a real like mental conundrum. I was like, do I stop? Do I carry on? But then again, probably the thought of other people being like, what time do you get? And it's always like, I got this time, but this is why.
Yeah.
And actually, they don't care probably, but I do. So if you said to me, did you run this morning? And I was like, yeah. And what time do you run? 25-minute 5K. You'd be like, oh, that's not on you, but I would worry about that.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't.
No, but I think you do. That's just the way.
Yeah.
Did you regret it when you stopped?
Yeah, but I did another one 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
Because I had put so much into the training, and I didn't want to do another cycle, firstly. And I knew that I needed to overcome it, because at that time, it was the hardest thing that I'd ever done, and I didn't achieve that. And the reason why I think I like running so much still now is the way that it translates into every other part of my life. Like, anything hard that you have to overcome there, it's like life shortened into a period of time. Like a 20-minute 5K, the emotions you would have gone through in that, like, I can't do it. And then you did do it. You're like, oh, I can do anything. And then you can't. But
I didn't believe you at the end, though. You said I'd done 1950 hours. There's no way. There's no way.
If you hadn't have done it, it'd have been mortifying, because you put so much into it. Well, phenomenal.
Are you the same? Because I pretty much, that was a 5K, and I mean, no one is tuning into this running episode to hear about my running, but while we're here, from 1K in, I was literally thinking, I have to stop. I have to stop. I genuinely don't want to do this. And I thought, well, Jamie's here. He's come. I have to run to the end.
Yeah.
But I really don't want to. I'm not going to make the 20 minutes, but I'll keep going. Did you find that essentially professional level? Do you get the same feeling as I just want to stop?
I think there's a really daunting moment when you start and you're like, this is way too quick. I can never do this. You know, like the gun goes and you sort of sprinting, you know, this is wrong. And then there's that sort of first, they say that it takes 3 minutes to get into sort of a steady state. So I always give it 3 minutes, and then I can still see my heart rate creeping. And it's just not a good thing. But through doing it a lot, you know that there's just a process to think about and remember. So I break things down a lot by so I'll give you like my marathon breakdown, which is quite a weird way to do it, but I'll do 10K because it's 10K, and then I'll do 16K because it's 10 miles, and then I'll do 21K because it's a half marathon, and then I'll do sort of 28K because that's horrible, 28 to 32, 32 to 38 is your race, and then the final 4 is longer than you think, is how I think of the final 4. People are like, oh, you're only 2K left at that point. Like 7, whatever, how long it's going to take you. That is so far at that point.
Yeah.
Like I have finished a marathon and got cramped with like 400 meters to go, and it's the most terrifying because you're like, please don't go now.
No.
And you have to concentrate for every single part of it.
Yeah, so I do it in a way of 100 meters, another 100,
yeah,
and another 100 meters,
yeah.
100 meters.
But I think every time you tick off 100 meters, it's validation that you can do another 100.
Yeah,
and I think that's probably how I would see it now. Is like you've done it so many times that you know what to expect, and you know that your brain is there.
Yeah.
It's going to say this is hard. It's
so
like,
do you block it out?
You don't block it out. You just keep going. Like I find that my brother once said to me, like, I'm maybe quite good at doing the mundane things over and over and over again. And I think about that with like motivation, say, to do these things. Like I don't care about motivation. I just will do it. And I think in those moments, you know, you want to stop, but I don't care. Like you just carry on, whatever that looks like. And at the end, again, because like you don't have the thought capacity to actually process that and think about it. At the end, you might review it and think, did I go out too hard? Why? Because if you're feeling good, like generally, you won't tip over that edge. And maybe with what we did with you, did we go a bit hard too soon? But at the same time, I would say we didn't. Yeah, because you did it and you just had to deal with those thoughts. But when you've now done that, if we did it again and you had those thoughts, you would carry on.
Yeah.
And if you've done that hundreds and hundreds of times, you will just...
You just know where you're at.
Yeah, I think so.
And you are very into sort of, you listen to a lot of performance podcasts, listen to people, but when you're at Vitality,
yeah,
you had to interview quite a few interesting people from different sports.
Yeah.
Who did you interview?
Yeah, it was amazing. People like Jonny Wilkinson, Jessica Ennis, Seb Coe, Joe Root, obviously Joss Butler. That's kind of how I got where I am now, in a sense. Daley Thompson was a really good one. Ellie Simmons. I was really fortunate. Like Vitality have an amazing like roster of talent that they work with. Tracy Neville, Chris Hoy, people like that.
Wow.
Yeah, like so love things like that. I love being around people like that. But I always had this sense of I really want someone to be asking me. I mean, kind of like where we are now, which is really cool. I mean, it's just I'm probably 1 or 2 steps away from like Joe Rogan, I imagine, after this point.
Well, it's the next logical step.
Yeah.
He uses me as kind of like a breeding ground.
Yeah, and I'm
works on Ross.
fairly sure I'll pass that.
Can Ross get a tune out of them?
Yeah, you're struggling. But no, those people like, I always, when I was running, and generally, like I always relate stuff back to running, but it's how I feel about everything, always was trying to look for the thing that those people had that others didn't. And I just love spending time and being around them because I don't think there is one thing, but I do think that they've all got different and amazing things about them.
Jonny Wilkinson, obviously, as a rugby player growing up, he was the big star. In fact, when I was once at London Irish, he was filming, I think, a Vitality advert, had a little sausage dog, so I assume that was it.
Yeah.
And he walked into the canteen, and I think, if I remember it correctly, it was the only time, as a professional rugby player, you meet lots of other professional players and people you've seen growing up, and it's always kind of like, oh, there's someone.
Yeah.
But it was the only time I saw a full room kind of just the atmosphere change when he walked in.
Yeah.
He had that much gravitas or aura or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
What was he like to interview?
Yeah, like I'm sure lots of people have heard him being interviewed. And the first time I ever got to work with him was in lockdown. And it was over a Zoom. We did this thing in lockdown where basically had to take everything online and support 1.5, 2 million members through this period. And we did something in half term for kids. So it was unreal. Like every day on Zoom, we would do a different thing. So one day we'd be doing a HIIT workout with Daley Thompson. The next day we'd be doing a cooking lesson with like a sports nutritionist. And on one of the days we did a kicking lesson with Jonny Wilkinson. And I was like, I'll be the subject. I'll be the host. And so it was me in my mum and dad's like annex sort of thing, and him at home with toilet rolls as balls, as like dummy balls. So I played football, but inevitably I didn't play rugby when I was younger. You probably can't guess. And I remember it was the first time really I'd worked with him, and he was sort of coaching me. It was like, how good's that? It's like the first football lesson you're having being David Beckham. Yeah. It was like the first kicking lesson was with Jonny Wilkinson. And he kept on saying to me, just forget the toilet rolls there. Just swing your leg. Don't even think about it. I'm like, I can see it, Jonny. There, mate. And
he's quite meta in his thing.
Oh, yeah. Like he's and he did the High Performance podcast quite early on. I think it was their first episode.
I heard
People were like, that's really different.
I felt like I'd gone to a different realm when
It's so hard to understand. And, he would say things like doing the washing up is just as important as lifting the Rugby World Cup. And I'm there like, wow. When I do the washing up,
Trust me, I do it well. But
yeah, exactly.
There's levels.
But anyway, so that was the first time. And then I worked with him a few more times. And then the sort of big one we did was for Mental Health Awareness Week. And it was like similar to this. We had as long as you want, but we sat for an hour. And I'd done a lot of work because he's one of those people that if you listen to him passively, it makes no sense, I don't think. Like, it's so incredible, and people sometimes feel sorry for him. Sometimes people worry for him. Other people get it and love it. And if you actually actively listen, I think it makes sense, but it's really hard to understand. So I was doing this interview and I was like, I've got to try and help people. I don't want to translate it. Like, I don't want to go too deep, but I want him to be able to be himself and say how he feels and how he wants to be. And so we went to Penny Hill Park for it, and there was this big like room, like quite a few cameras, and him and I just in the same sort of like setup as this. And I was like, oh, I'm a bit nervous, Jonny, just before it started. And so he sort of turned his chair towards me and he was like, I need you here. And I was like, that makes me more nervous, if I'm honest, Jonny. And he was like, I was like, oh, you know, I'm really excited and interested for this. Like, I can't wait. And he was like, I will feed off of you. Like, you give me whatever you can and I will take that. And that's how this will go. Is like, your energy will feel my energy. And it was the most relaxed I've ever been talking to someone. Like, I remember being in it, being like, I'm enjoying this so much. And we spoke for an hour.
Really?
I did manage to keep on, because you can't be selfish in these things where you're like, I'm loving this, but the audience, I don't care what they think. Like, they're not getting what they want. So I did have to manage that. But at the end, again, we'd been speaking for a while. Everyone's like, great, thanks so much. Jonny's agent's there. And again, at the end, he like stopped and turned his chair towards me and we carried on. And he was asking me like really nice questions about, you know, why do you do this? And I was like, because I just like love being able to hear from people like you. And he was so encouraging and supportive, and everything he said, I completely got.
Yeah.
And I looked at him and, you know, like seeing someone like that who's achieved so much and he's still like in phenomenal shape. And I was like, God, you look good still, like immaculate. But then it kind of just made me think he's cracked it. I thought it was amazing. I thought it was in brilliant form, but he said it and you can see like sometimes he is, sometimes he isn't. But he was really different in terms of how everyone else was.
So he turned you before you're interviewing him and he says, I need you here.
Yeah.
That's so...
don't worry, Jonny, I've got you.
Oh, that's good.
You can watch it on YouTube. I haven't actually ever watched it back.
Really?
Yeah, because
How long is it?
It's probably, well, I don't know what the final edit
Probably
was.
a few coffees before.
Yeah.
Sit in a dark room.
You'll probably have a different opinion. I'll watch it back and think, that is not what I thought. But it's probably 45 minutes. You know what? It could have been as...
It was a 5-minute interview.
Well, I remember thinking before we started, I was like, how are you, Jonny? And he was like, well, it's concept, isn't it? And I was like, well, not really, no, just...
Oh, really?
How are you?
Depends what you mean by you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's define that. And I was like, let's not. Let's just say fine.
You good?
Yeah.
That's me.
Cool.
Yeah, his was the first book I ever read.
Really?
Jonny Wilkinson,
I think, have you heard of what he says about that book since, though?
I read My World.
Okay.
I must have been 10
right
at the time, and it would have been, a few years after he kicked the winning goal?
Because I think he looks back on some of the stuff he said and did very differently now.
Yeah, sure. Don't we all?
I've always been a legend.
Always been. My decision never changed.
Yeah, correct.
That's interesting. Was anyone else particularly...
Yeah, like they're all amazing in their own right. I think someone like Daley Thompson is niche. Like, just, you know, when someone speaks and you think, no, really, like, tell me, like, he would say, I'll give you an example, like he won back-to-back Olympics. He had like the most amazing competition with Jürgen Hinkson and people like that. And he would go into an Olympic Games as favourite, but then I think the second time he wasn't favourite. And I was like, were you nervous ever? He was like, no. And I was like, come on, like,
really?
You must have been. And he was, I just love competition, you know, like I would just work. I wanted people to be good. So he was interesting and very funny. And then the other one, like Jess Ennis she out-indexes anyone in terms of like how highly regarded she is and interest and engagement. And she's just the most like lovely person. But with her, I would say there wasn't anything that I was like, oh, I can emulate that. I just think she's
another level.
She's just like genetically brilliant, mindset brilliant, a really solid person, just has a high baseline for everything. And that's just good performance across the board. And I think putting those together.
But she outperforms everyone. Is that in terms of marketing statistic.
Yeah. Yeah,
Really?
things like that. Yeah, I think for maybe a certain generation like mine, I'm not sure if you were 20 now, whether that's the same, but yeah, certainly. Well, she was Vitality's first ambassador, and she's the longest standing, and by far, like she still outperforms everyone.
It is interesting because that generation of athletes in the 2012 Olympics, slightly 2008, but mostly 2012. I know it was our home Olympics.
Yeah.
But we haven't seen stardom like that, I think, since. Is that almost because we're more successful, more people win, therefore it's less?
Yeah. I think, like, I love the Olympics, but I just think it needs more stories and more personalities and more marketing. Like the sprint documentary has been amazing, but if I said to people that love sport, name me who is lining up in the men's 100 metres final, and they can't do that, I think that is an issue. And there was, Super Saturday where you had Mo, Greg Rutherford and Jess like all winning at the same time, but we knew all about them before, and there's that kind of like relatability to them. Whereas now, I don't know what it is. Maybe there's different sports which are more commercially viable, but I think they should do some work because it's amazing when you see, and like another one, just dropping you all the names here if you'd like them.
Please.
Like Joe Root, someone like that. It was, do you want a story?
Yeah.
Okay. I was interviewing him with Jess on the same day in Sheffield, and it was the day of the Cricket World Cup semi-final where England were playing India, and Joss was batting with Alex Hales. India got something like 180. I can't really remember, but they got, a decent score. And we were sitting down just about to do the interview, and I was like, Joe, are you a bit distracted? Like, I am. Should we watch the cricket first and then we can come back to this? And he was like, well, let's start and then we can see. I was like, okay, it's nice of you. So we started, and I'm giving him all the chat, assuming he's loving it. And then I was like, should we just have a quick break here and check the score? And it was something like 60 for none. And I was like, oh, it's going well. Should we go have a watch? And he was like, they'll win. It'll be fine. And I was like, oh, like, you think so? And he was like, yeah, Joss and Alex will do it. And I was like, okay. And then we carried on, and then we finished, and they didn't lose a wicket, and Joss and Alex Hales both smashed it around, and he was just so confident in them. And I think, like, working...
Really, he just knew? Based off a little look, okay. If they put 60 up, that's pretty much...
Well, and like, working with Joss now, he's so talented. It's unbelievable. His talent is insane.
I think the further you go away from being younger, when you're all playing similar sports, you actually forget how good those people would have to be to make it to that level.
100%.
On that, do you think Joe Root will beat Tendulkar total runs?
I don't think it matters.
It matters to me.
I put him and Joss the same because they're the only two that I could really have any insight on. Is like Joe Root loves cricket. He plays so much. Like, it was really interesting. I worked with a guy who's the sports psychologist for Man City, but also has worked with the England cricket team. And I was asking him about Joe. I think this is also on YouTube, maybe. I'm not plugging a YouTube channel at all because I've got no views. But, and he was saying, I was like, what is it about Joe that's really good? And he was like, if you watch him practice, he celebrates his own wins. Really? So he'll be in the nets and he's there for hours and hours and hours. But when he hits a good shot, he'll be like, oh, that was nice. And,
making that sort of
connection. Whereas other players will only look at the negative side.
Go through the motions.
Yeah. Whereas he loves a good shot. He's like, oh, really? That was sweet. I mean, whether that's true or not, I can't speak for him, but I can see things like that. And similarly with Joss, like, he just doesn't, I wouldn't say over prepare, but when he gets in the net, he just does things which are, and he was built for it from day one, as far as I can tell. Like in school, it was always going to be the thing. You get to a certain age, you start skipping lessons, and because you're that talented, and then you go through academies, and that's the only, like, we went to WeWork together not too long ago, and he was baffled by the whole thing. Yeah, he was like, everyone's got a Mac, and I was like, yes, it's big business,
Take away.
Yeah, people just sit here and work all day, and I was like, yeah. I think Apple's going to kick off. Cool.
Why would I see?
Yeah.
And to wrap us up in a neat bow here.
Okay.
Favorite book?
I'll give you a different answer because there's loads of like really good like self-development ones.
Please.
But there's one called The Happiest Man Alive. Have you heard of that?
No.
It's about an Auschwitz survivor, and it's just great for perspective.
It's not the Viktor Frankl one?
No, it's not.
Okay.
No. I can't remember his name, but it's quite a short book.
Yeah.
And he's just been through the most horrific things you could ever go through, and just, speaks about it and carries on. And I think it's a good thing to do when you're challenged in your own life. Like, it won't be worse than his.
Yeah. Nice. And then dinner party guests. 3, dead or alive?
Plus me.
Pardon?
Plus me.
Plus you are there, unfortunately.
So 3 more. We've got 4-person table.
So it's an esteemed, you're inviting.
Okay, I would say Obama.
Really?
I think he's immaculate in all parts.
Okay.
The way he delivers himself is phenomenal, I think. So him.
He'd have some stories as well.
Yeah, good chat. I see, now we've got to think of the...
No, don't worry about chemistry.
Okay, cool. They're all getting on.
Yeah.
Obviously, it would be an athlete. Kobe Bryant.
Yeah.
Just, I think his mentality and drive is very inspirational. And then my mum, because I'd love to see her with them.
Just see how she meets.
She'd love to meet them too.
Mrs. Monk.
Yeah, and she would...
Barack Obama, Kobe Bryant, and your mum.
Yeah.
And you.
Yeah, well, it would be nice for me to bring her. It'd be like, Mum, let's go for dinner.
Jamie Monk invites Barack Obama and Kobe Bryant for dinner with his mum.
Yeah, no, but the reason why I want to bring her is because I'd like her. She'd enjoy it.
Yeah,
and I think it'd be one of my biggest drivers in life. I think is like being able to do those things for other people.
Right.
Sounds a bit cheesy, but if I could organise a situation and I could bring her along, I think
the meeting of the minds, isn't it?
Also, like, it would ruin the vibe in a great way.
I think
she'd add to it hugely.
I'd like to.
So LeBron, so Kobe, like, tell me about the mummer mentality. She's not asking that question.
No, she's not. She's going to find different things.
Yeah, exactly. And I'd like to see how they are with her, because I think you can tell a lot. I think Obama would be superb.
Yeah,
but Kobe, I think
you get on with everyone. I actually love his. I've seen a lot of videos going around lately about him saying, if you don't think you're up to the level, wait until you actually get into these rooms with these people and figure out how unimpressive they actually are. So I think imposter syndrome, 70% of people have it.
Right.
Everyone thinks they're not quite good enough.
Yeah.
I thought it was a nice quote from him. But anyway, we are going to leave it there. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
Jam-packed, info-packed episode.
I hope so.
Jamie Monk, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it. Thanks, mate.
Well, there you have it. Jamie Monk. Hopefully you enjoyed that episode. And if you'd like to check out Jamie's company, Live Brave Pilates, it's an online Pilates class. And if you're feeling like you need to stretch yourself out a little bit more, go and check it out. Anyway, thank you for listening and getting to the end once again. And as always, any feedback, please let me know. All the best. Have a good day.